Hello friends, welcome back to Citizen Geek. I am your host, Matty G, and today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts with you on this week's episode of Supergirl. In this week's episode, titled Fight or Flight, we continue to follow Kara as she comes into her own as a superhero and kind of tries to figure out what her role in this world is going to be. She doesn't want to be known as Superman's cousin or, you know, the girl that is related to Superman or, you know, Superman's sidekick or anything like that. She's out to prove that she can do this on her own. And this was a process of not just her proving it to herself, but also to the world around her and even to the people closest to her. You know, we're only 3 episodes into this series so far, and it continues to impress me. I feel like this is one of those rare series, and it's sad that this is a rarity these days, but it really feels like it is, where the creators actually sat down before making the show and actually thought out all the logistics of why these characters act how they act and do what they do and why things are going to happen. I have watched so many new series come around over the last few years that always seem to be focused on what is a really cool idea, but then when you sit down and watch, it feels like the creators just thought, let's go shoot this now, it's such a great idea, without really sitting down beforehand to think out the logistics. And as a result, there are always like plot holes and inconsistencies, and it just gets really frustrating. Thankfully, that's not the case with Supergirl. In this episode particularly, they focused on answering the question as to why Kara doesn't just ask Superman for help, and why Superman isn't going to be appearing in this series, at least not all the time, or not very much. Which is good, because that's really important if you're going to do a show called Supergirl, but you're not going to have Superman in it. This is a question that a lot of fans have been asking from day one, so it was really smart of them to actually answer that in a really pretty definite way in this episode, and in a way that actually made sense and felt genuine. I liked Reactron. I thought he was a much more interesting villain than the series has kind of given us so far. He had lost his wife due to an incident involving Superman, and as a result, he had come to blame Superman for that and wanted to take revenge on him. He was a much more interesting villain than what we've gotten thus far, so that was nice. I liked how he was kind of like a darker, twisted take on Iron Man. They also played around a bit with the whole kind of burgeoning love triangle between Kara and Wynn and James a bit more in this episode, and they did it in a way that felt okay, like it felt good. It was kind of fun, and you know, there's clearly an attraction between Kara and James, but you know, he's got his own baggage that he's kind of dealing with, and that actually kind of affects his relationship with Kara. And on the other side, you've got Wynn, who's like, you know, the loyal friend who is always there to help, who Kara doesn't necessarily see in a romantic way yet, but you can kind of see that possibly going in that direction down the road. And speaking of Wynn, he had one of the standout moments of this episode for me when he found out that Clark was Superman kind of by accident. I loved his kind of like geeky fanboy reaction to that. It was definitely one of the highlights of this week's episode for me. You know, this episode was all about Kara kind of having to prove to herself and to the rest of the world that she can actually stand up and be a superhero kind of on her own. Obviously, yes, she has a team that will help her and friends that are there for her, but when it comes to actually putting herself out there as a superhero, she needs to show that she can do it. And especially with Superman, you know, in this world, she needs to show that she can do it without him. And that's what this episode was really all about, and I thought they did it in a way that made a lot of sense. We saw this most clearly in her relationship with Jimmy in this episode, and the conflict that they came into when she discovered that he had actually called Superman to help her out. And while Jimmy did make it clear that he had done it mainly out of his own personal insecurities and worries, it was really nice to see Kara call him out on that and basically tell him, you know, you are not responsible for me, and I need to do this on my own. I need to be able to prove that I can do this. I feel like if Supergirl was a lesser series or made by lesser people, then this would have been an episode that would have been all about how Kara needed help but wasn't willing to get it when she needed it and was like pushing people away and, you know, wasn't admitting the truth to herself, and that the episode would ultimately end with her being like, yeah, I need help, you know, I need to learn that I need help. But thankfully this show seems to be made by people who are a lot smarter than that, and because of that, this episode really reinforced that she does need to prove herself, and that in fact she can do it. She just needs the chance. You know, she makes a point during this episode that Superman, you know, when he first arrived, there was nobody to help him. He had to figure all this out on his own. He had to prove himself on his own. And if she's gonna become a superhero and prove to the world that she can do it, she needs to be able to do it herself as well. She needs to be able to have that chance to learn and prove these things to everyone on her own. and that's why she's not going to call Clark for help all the time. I think that's smart, and I think the show handled it in a way that made sense. Like, you understood why she would do that. And it was also really, really nice to have them do it in a way that showed like that Clark agreed with her and had faith in her that she could do it. I really loved the scene at the end where she and Clark were kind of talking through instant messaging, and he basically gave her his encouragement about, you're doing a great job and I totally believe in you. And, I had a talk with Jimmy. This isn't going to happen again. I think you can do it. I know you can do it, and I have faith in you, and I'm really proud of you. I loved how Melissa Benoist played that scene where you could really see how much that meant to her. I thought it was a really emotionally resonant scene, and I really liked it a lot. I did kind of feel like the way that they brought this theme into focus in this episode through James, by having him kind of suffering this kind of bout of insecurity and calling Superman because he was worried and wanted to make sure she was okay and got help. That seemed a little out of character for James at this point from what we've kind of learned about him. He seems like he really believes in her, and I felt like it was a little bit of a stretch that he would kind of immediately like call up Superman to come help her because of that. Even though he admits at one point in the episode that it was more about his own personal insecurities, I did think it kind of felt a little forced. I am starting to warm up to the whole DEO stuff a little bit more. I'm in particular becoming more and more curious about what they're going to reveal about the true identity of Hank Henshaw. When I did my last video about Supergirl, I talked about how I thought he was probably going to turn out to be a villain. But now I'm not so sure, I'm starting to think a little bit more on that. I was reading comments about this episode on another review. I did end up actually reading a couple different reviews of this episode, and in one of the comments, somebody mentioned that they thought that Hank Henshaw might actually turn out to be Martian Manhunter in disguise, which would be really interesting. And given that this is made by the same people who make Arrow and Flash, which are shows that love to pull in, other DC characters all the time, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that turned out to be the case or something like that. So it made me rethink my initial theories about Hank Henshaw, and so I am curious to find out where that story goes from here. I like the relationship between Kara and her sister. I think that that's getting stronger and stronger with each episode. The sense of real sisterhood between those two characters works really well. It feels believable. It's very sweet, and it really helps ground Kara as a character. You don't see like a lot of shows and movies these days where we just kind of see, what the superhero does in their downtime. I also like the Homeland reference. I thought that was kind of a fun wink to the audience, If you don't know, Melissa Benoist appeared in a couple episodes of the first season of Homeland. So I appreciated that, and I thought that was kind of fun. We got to know Maxwell Lord a bit more in this episode. He's clearly like the cocky playboy archetype, that you see a lot in superhero storylines. We got the sense that he also has had a relationship of some kind with Cat Grant at one point. He's not that interesting of a character yet. I'll be curious to see what they do with him over the course of the series. I didn't mention it in my previous video, but I'm also really enjoying Callista Flockhart's performance. Given that she was playing what could be such a big character, I was a little nervous. A character like Cat Grant could very easily be way over the top. If you've ever seen Jada Pinkett Smith in Gotham, you'll know what I mean by that. I continue to really enjoy this series. I think they're doing a great job with it, and I'm excited to keep watching and see where it goes. Thanks as always, guys, for watching. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode. Do you think that the show is doing a really good job in answering its logistical questions and kind of explaining why we're not going to be seeing the Man of Steel all the time in this series? Did you think Reactron was kind of a more interesting villain than what we've gotten so far? And do you guys have any thoughts on what you think Hank Henshaw's real role and identity are going to turn out to be? Thanks as always for watching, guys. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy what I do. Take care, and I will see you all again real soon.